Jikiao Huang always arrived at work first. By 7 in the morning, his black sedan was already driving into the underground parking of Huang and Partners Law Corporation, located in the business heart of Seoul. 23 floors of glass and steel, offices where the fates of companies and people were decided, a reputation built through years of impeccable work. He took the elevator to his office on the top floor, turned on the coffee machine, and looked out at the city waking below. The routine calmed him. It reminded him that he was in control of his life. At 45, Jikiao headed one of the most influential law firms in the country. His name was mentioned in business circles with respect and a hint of fear. He was ruthless in court but honest. He never took a case if he doubted its righteousness. His clients paid enormous fees not only for his professionalism but for the certainty of victory. Tall, with sharp features and dark hair combed back, Jikiao seemed like a man without weaknesses. Colleagues joked that instead of a heart, he had paragraphs of law. He never denied those rumors. After that incident 8 years ago, he had decided that feelings were a luxury he could no longer afford. His secretary, Misuk, had worked with him for 5 years. A middle-aged woman with graying temples and a keen gaze, she could read her boss's mood from the smallest signs. Today, as she entered the office with a folder of documents, she noticed that Jikiao had been looking out the window longer than usual. "Mr. Huang, you have a meeting at 10 with a new client," she reminded him. "The woman insisted on a personal consultation with you. She refused to meet with other lawyers." Jikiao nodded without turning. Such requests were common. People wanted the best, and he gave them that. "What's the case?" "Family dispute. Custody reinstatement, compensation for damages." She didn't go into detail over the phone. "All right. Prepare the standard documents." The day began as usual, the morning meeting with junior partners, discussion of 2 ongoing cases, a call to a client whose company was involved in complicated merger negotiations. Jikiao worked methodically, switching between tasks with surgical precision. Nothing foretold that in a few hours his world would turn upside down. At 5 to 10, Misuk knocked on the door. "Mr. Huang, the client is here. Shall I bring her in?" "Yes." He rose from his desk, straightened his tie out of habit, and prepared for the meeting. The door opened. Jikiao turned and froze. Time stopped. The sounds of the office faded. He saw only her. Yoonhee. The very same Yoonhee he had searched for 8 years ago, calling friends, colleagues, even the police. Yoonhee, who had one morning simply vanished from his life, leaving neither a note nor an explanation. Yoonhee, because of whom he had gone sleepless for months, and then forbade himself even to think of her name. She stood in the doorway, and Jikiao barely recognized in this woman the girl he had once loved. Yoonhee was thinner, her face gaunt, her eyes stripped of the spark that once drew him in. Her hair, once long and flowing, was now cut short. She was dressed plainly, cheap jacket, faded jeans, a worn shoulder bag. But it was her. The same face, the same shape of the eyes, the same tiny scar on her chin from a childhood accident she had told him about years ago. "Yoonhee?" Jikiao's voice came out hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken in a week. She flinched at the sound of her name. Her hands tightened on the bagstrap. "Jikiao," she breathed. "I didn't know you worked here. I knew about Huang and Partners, but I didn't think it was you. I'm sorry. If you want, I'll leave and find another lawyer." "No," he said sharply. "Come in. Sit down." Misuk gave her boss a surprised look. Jikiao was always composed, but now he was pale as chalk. She quietly left, closing the door behind her. Yoonhee slowly walked to the chair opposite his desk and sat on the edge, as if afraid she might be thrown out. Jikiao lowered himself into his chair, not taking his eyes off her. Thousands of questions swarmed in his mind, but he forced himself to stay in control. "What happened?" he asked in a steady, professional tone. Yoonhee lifted her gaze, and Jikyal saw such pain in her eyes that his heart clenched. I need your help, she said softly. I know I have no right to ask you for anything after what I did. But I have nowhere else to go. I have money. Not much, but I'll pay your fee, even if it takes years. What kind of case? She pulled a worn folder from her bag and placed it on the desk. Jikyal opened it. Inside were old photographs, copies of documents, medical records. In one photo was a little girl of about 5, with dark eyes and a serious face. This is my daughter, Yoonhee said, her voice trembling. She's 5. I want to sue my ex-husband's family. They took everything from me. Threw me out when she was just 3 months old. Took my documents, left me homeless. For 5 years I survived however I could, working wherever possible, saving money. Now I have proof they lied. I want my rights back. I want them to pay for what they did. Jikyal listened, feeling a cold fury rise inside him. He didn't know all the details yet, but he already understood that Yoonhee had been through hell. Tell me everything from the beginning, he said. Leave nothing out. Yoonhee took a deep breath. Her fingers nervously played with the edge of her bag, but her gaze stayed firm. She had decided to tell the truth, all of it, no matter how painful. After we broke up, she began, and Jikyal noticed her voice falter on the words we broke up. I got a new job. Just a clerk in the archive of a construction company. That's where I met Lim Song-yoon. He worked in the supply department. Quiet, polite, never pushy. We started talking. He'd invite me to lunch, walk me home. 6 months later, he proposed. She paused, and Jikyal saw a shadow cross her face. I said yes, Yoonhee continued. Not because I loved him. I just wanted to forget. Wanted a new life. Song-yoon seemed reliable. His mother, Lim Hae-jin, met me coldly, but I thought we'd get along eventually. A year after the wedding, I got pregnant. Song-yoon was happy at first, but when he told his mother, she made a scene. Yoonhee pulled out several handwritten pages from the folder, notes she had kept all those years. Hae-jin came to our home the next day after she learned about the pregnancy. She brought a private doctor. Made Song-yoon take tests. A week later, she showed him some medical report. I saw the color drain from his face as he read it. He said nothing to me then. Just started avoiding any talk about the baby. Jikyal listened in silence, feeling anger simmer beneath his calm exterior. When Sohee was born, the first 3 months were peaceful, Yoonhee said quietly. Song-yoon was barely home, but I thought he was just busy. Then one evening, early spring, Sohee was exactly 3 months old, Hae-jin came over. With her were Song-yoon and his older brother, Min-jae. Hae-jin held that same document, the medical report. Yoonhee stopped. Her hands trembled. Jikyal poured her a glass of water from the carafe on his desk. She nodded in thanks and took a sip. Hae-jin screamed that Song-yoon was sterile. That he'd had complications after an appendicitis surgery in his youth, an infection that led to irreversible consequences. She said the doctors had confirmed he could never father a child. She called me a whore. Accused me of cheating. Demanded I name the real father. Song-yoon stood there, silent. He didn't even try to defend me. Her voice shook with restrained emotion, but she went on. I tried to explain that it was impossible. That there was no one but Song-yoon. But Hae-jin wouldn't listen. She grabbed Sohee from the crib. The baby was crying, and she shouted that she wouldn't let this bastard child bear the Lim name. Min-jae tore my bag from my hands. It had Sohee's birth certificate, her medical records, everything. They shoved me out the door. Literally threw me into the hallway with the baby in my arms. It was early March, late evening, still cold after winter. I was in home clothes. Sohee was wrapped only in a blanket, no coat, no warm things. I tried to restore the documents through the hospital where Sohee was born. But they said the father's consent was required since his name was on record. I went to court on my own, but without money for a lawyer and without proof of residence, nothing moved forward. They rejected me again and again. Jikyal clenched his fists under the desk. He pictured the scene, a young woman with an infant in her arms, thrown out into the cold. He imagined the terror she must have felt. I banged on the door, begged them to return at least the baby's things. Neighbors came out and looked, but no one intervened. Finally, Sang-yoon came out. He threw me a bag with baby clothes and some money. Told me to disappear and never come back. That if I tried to sue them, they would destroy me. That they had connections, lawyers, money. And I had nothing. Yoonhee wiped the tears that had formed with the back of her hand. That night we slept at the station. I fed Sohee and thought about what to do next. I had no documents for the child, they'd taken everything. No money, only those few bills Sang-yoon threw at me. My mother died 2 years ago, I never knew my father. I had no relatives. I couldn't come to you. I understood I had no right to appear in your life again. Jikyal wanted to ask, why then did she leave, why did she disappear 8 years ago, but he kept silent. It wasn't the time. Yoonhee needed his help as a lawyer now. What did you do next? He asked. I found a room in the cheapest neighborhood. The landlady agreed to rent without a contract, for cash. I got a job as a cleaner in a hospital. Worked nights while Sohee slept. Then I took extra jobs, mopping floors in shops, cleaning offices. Slept 3 or 4 hours a day. Sohee grew. I saved every extra bill. I knew the only way to prove the truth was a DNA test. But it was expensive. Very expensive for someone who earned pennies. She reached into the folder again and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Jikyal. He unfolded it. It was a bill from a private medical laboratory. The date was 2 weeks ago. 3 years, Yoonhee whispered. 3 years I saved for that test. The first 2 years I was just surviving, couldn't set aside a one. Only when Sohee started kindergarten and I could work more did I begin to save. 2 months ago I finally gathered the required amount. But the test needed the father's biological material. I watched Sang-yoon. I learned where he worked, where he ate. One day I waited for him at a cafe. I took his cup after he left. I brought both samples to the lab. They said it was enough for analysis. Jikyal looked at her with growing admiration. This woman, who had everything taken from her, hadn't broken. She had fought. For 3 years she fought for her child. The results came last week. Yoonhee took a sealed envelope from the folder. I wanted to open it myself, but I decided it would be right if a lawyer did it. I don't want mistakes. I want everything legal, correct. So they can't dispute the results. Jikyal took the envelope. His fingers trembled, just a little, but Yoonhee noticed. You can open it in front of me, she said. I must know the truth. Even if it's not what I expect. He tore the envelope and unfolded a few sheets. First came a description of the testing methodology, then technical data. Jikyal skimmed until he reached the conclusions. What he read froze him. Jikyal read the report a second time, then a third. The letters formed words, the words, sentences, but their meaning was so shocking that it took him a moment to fully grasp the information. And? Yoonhee asked quietly. Her voice trembled. What does it say? Jikyal raised his eyes to her. The probability of paternity for Lim Sang-yoon is 99.98%, he pronounced slowly, clearly. Sohee is his biological daughter. Without any doubt. Yoonhee gasped. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. Instead she leaned back in the chair, covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook. I knew it, she whispered through her fingers. I knew it all along. But to hear confirmation. My God, for 5 years they lied. For 5 years I lived like an outcast, and my daughter grew up without a father, without a family, because these people lied. Jikyal gave her time to recover. He himself continued to study the document. That Sohee was Sanyun's daughter was already enough for a lawsuit. But there was another detail that changed the whole picture. Yoon-hee, he called. Look at me. She lowered her hands. Her face was wet with tears, but her gaze became firmer. There is additional information here. Jikyal pointed to a paragraph at the end of the report. The laboratory ran an extended analysis and found a rare genetic marker in Sohee. Such a marker occurs in about 1% of Korea's population. It is inherited strictly through the paternal line. And according to the database, this marker is registered in the Lim family. Moreover, the lab notes that the presence of this marker excludes the possibility of infertility in the carrier. Yoon-hee looked at him, puzzled. Meaning? Meaning Sanyun was never infertile. Jikyal felt cold rage spread through his veins. The medical report his mother showed you was forged. A lie. They deliberately slandered you, knowing that Sohee is their blood. Silence fell. Yoon-hee slowly realized the scale of the deception. But why? She whispered. Why would they do this? Why kick out their own granddaughter? That I will have to find out. Jikyal stood and walked to the window. The city below lived its life, but here, in this office, a fate was being decided. But I can already hypothesize. The Lim family wanted to get rid of you for some reason. Maybe they had plans for another daughter-in-law. Maybe you didn't fit some image. Accusing you of infidelity is the easiest way to sever the tie and make you the guilty one. They didn't see the child as a problem. After all, they had their evidence that it wasn't their blood. He turned back to Yoon-hee. But they miscalculated. They didn't think you would be able to save for a test. They didn't think you'd want to fight. They underestimated you. Yoon-hee stood up and stepped toward him. Jikyal, I want to sue them. I want to regain full rights to Sohee. I want them to pay compensation for those 5 years. I want them punished for slander, for cruel treatment, for everything. Will you help me? He looked at her. At the woman who had once broken his heart by vanishing without explanation. At the woman who had survived in poverty for 5 years for the sake of her child. At the woman now standing before him with hope in her eyes. I will destroy them, he said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. They will pay for every day you were on the street. For every tear you shed. For every night you couldn't sleep worrying about your daughter. I give you my word. Yoon-hee nodded. For the first time in a long while a faint smile appeared on her face. Thank you, she whispered. Jikyal returned to his desk and pressed the intercom button. Misuk, connect me with Choi Miho. Miho was the best private detective he had worked with. And cancel all my meetings for today. I have an urgent matter. He looked at Yoon-hee. I will need all information about the Lim family. Addresses, workplaces, financial data, connections. Everything you know. We'll start by finding out exactly how the medical report was fabricated. If we can prove the forgery, it will be grounds not only for a civil suit but also for a criminal case. Yoon-hee nodded and sat down again. She took another notebook from her bag. Jikyal saw it was filled with tiny handwriting from cover to cover. I wrote down everything I could learn about them over the years, she explained. Where they live, where they go, who they talk to. I didn't stalk them, I just wanted to know. To understand what kind of people they are. The ones who destroyed my life. Jikyal took the notebook and flipped through the pages. Yoon-hee had been methodical. She recorded dates, times, places. There were addresses, phone numbers, even photographs apparently taken with an old phone with a poor camera. Yoon-hee also explained that the infertility report had been shown to Sanyun even before her pregnancy, right after the wedding. Haejin had prepared the ground in advance so her son wouldn't believe Yoon-hee when she became pregnant. This woman had not only fought, she had prepared for war. "You've done tremendous work," he said with genuine respect. "This will help the case a great deal." The voice of Misut came through the intercom. "Mr. Huang, Mr. Choi is on the line." "Put him on speaker." Jikyal pressed the button. "Miho, I need your help. Urgent investigation." "I'm listening," the detective's calm voice replied. "The Lim family. The mother, Lim Haejin, 62. The son, Lim Sang-yoon, 37. Another son, Lim Min-jae, 40. I need full information, financial documents, medical records, connections, reputation. I'm especially interested in any mentions of medical reports from 5 years ago or earlier concerning Sang-yoon's health. Any doctors who might have issued such reports. I suspect a bought medical specialist." Mio's voice came through the speaker. "Got it," he said without asking unnecessary questions. "Deadline? 3 days. Maximum. Consider it done." Gichal ended the call and turned to Yoon-hee. "Now tell me about our past," he said softly. "Why did you leave 8 years ago? What happened?" Yoon-hee paled. She clearly hadn't expected that question now. "Gichal, that has nothing to do with the case." "It does," he insisted. "If the Lim family knows how to manipulate people, if they're capable of forgery and lies, I need to know every possible angle of attack. And I need to know whether your disappearance back then had anything to do with them." Yoon-hee was silent for a long time. Then she took a deep breath. "All right," she whispered. "I'll tell you. But not today. Give me some time. It's painful to remember." Gichal nodded. He understood. He himself wasn't ready to reopen wounds from 10 years ago, not now, when they had a more urgent fight ahead. "Agreed," he said. "Then let's get back to the case." They worked until evening. Gichal drew up a list of all possible lawsuits they could file against the Lim family: restoration of Yoon-hee's parental rights, legal recognition of Sang-yoon's paternity, compensation for moral and material damages, defamation, and document forgery. Each point required evidence, and Gichal methodically divided the tasks: what to check, which documents to request, which witnesses to approach. When darkness fell outside, Yoon-hee finally stood up. "I have to go," she said. "So he's home alone. I asked my neighbor to watch her, but I don't want to be late." "I'll drive you," Gichal offered. "No need," Yoon-hee shook her head. "It's far. We live on the city's outskirts." "All the more reason," he took his jacket from the rack. "It's late. I don't want you riding public transport alone." Yoon-hee wanted to protest, but when she saw the determination in his eyes, she nodded. They took the elevator down to the underground parking lot. Gichal opened the door of his sedan, and Yoon-hee sat in the front seat, clearly uneasy in such a luxurious car. She gave him the address, and he entered it into the navigator. 40 minutes of driving, the neighborhood really was on the edge of the city. They drove in silence. Gichal focused on the road, but out of the corner of his eye he saw Yoon-hee clutching her bag nervously. She stared out the window, her face showing that her thoughts were far away. "You look good," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I mean, you've made it. Your firm is famous. I've read about your cases in the news. You became what you wanted to be." Gichal gave a humorless smile. "Success is a relative thing. There's money, there's reputation. But that doesn't make a person happy." "You never married?" Yoon-hee asked quietly. "No." "Why not?" He was silent for a few seconds before answering. "After you, I decided relationships are too complicated. It's easier to live alone. Less pain." Yoon-hee flinched at the bitterness in his voice. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I truly am. Don't apologize, he cut her off. Not now. When you're ready to tell the truth, then we'll talk. The rest of the ride passed in silence. At last, they turned into an old neighborhood of shabby 5-story buildings. The lighting was poor, sidewalks cracked, and the playground swings rusted. Gitchall parked by one of the entrances. We're here. Yoon-hee reached for the door handle, but Gitchall stopped her by touching her hand. Wait, he said. Before you go, I want you to understand something. This case isn't just a legal procedure. The Lim family will fight back. They might try to intimidate you, bribe you, slander you again. They might even try to use Sohee against you. You have to be ready for everything. Yoon-hee nodded. I'm ready. I've been ready for 5 years. Good. One more thing. From this moment on, you're not alone. You have me, my team, and our resources. If anything happens, call me immediately. Anytime, day or night. Understood? He handed her a business card and wrote his personal number on the back. Gitchall. She began, but he interrupted. This isn't because of the past. It's because you're my client, and I protect my clients. Remember that. But they both knew it wasn't entirely true. Yoon-hee took the card, squeezed it in her palm, and nodded. She got out of the car and headed toward the entrance. Gitchall watched her until she disappeared behind the peeling door. Then he sat for a few more minutes, staring at the lit window on the 3rd floor. That was where Yoon-hee lived. That was where her daughter, whom he hadn't yet met but was already ready to protect, was growing up. He started the car and drove back to the city center. On the way, he called Miho. Start digging first thing tomorrow morning, he said. And one more thing. Check all connections the Lim family had 10 years ago. I'm interested in any overlap with a young woman named Seo Yoon-hee, workplaces, acquaintances, everything. You think they crossed paths before? I don't know. But I want to rule it out. Got it. I'll keep you posted. Gitchall got home late that night. His apartment in an upscale district greeted him with silence and order. Minimalist design, expensive furniture, panoramic windows overlooking the city, none of it brought warmth. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, stepped onto the balcony, and stared at the lights of night Seoul. Yoon-hee was back in his life. After 10 years of silence, she'd reappeared, and everything he'd buried so carefully inside him came alive again. The anger at her betrayal. The pain of loss. But also something else. That feeling he once had when they were together. The feeling that made him wake up with a smile and fall asleep with her name on his lips. He took a sip of whiskey. This wasn't the time for sentimentality. Now he had to focus on the case. The Lim family had made a mistake when they threw Yoon-hee out on the street. They didn't know that by doing so, they had brought upon themselves a man who never forgave injustice. Gitchall Hwan was going to destroy their lives just as methodically as they had destroyed Yoon-hee's. And he would start tomorrow. The next morning began with a phone call. Gitchall had just entered his office when Miho's number flashed on the screen. You work fast, he said instead of a greeting. I didn't sleep all night, replied the detective. And I found something interesting. Very interesting. Can we meet? Come to the office in an hour. Gitchall hung up and called Misuk, asking her to gather all the junior partners who would work on Yoon-hee's case. He chose 3, Seon-woo, a sharp-minded young woman with a talent for finding clues in documents, Taegu, a specialist in family law, and Jae-hyun, who handled criminal cases. When they gathered in the conference room, Gitchall laid out the essence of the case. He didn't go into details about his past with Yoon-hee, that wasn't relevant to the work. He stated the facts: a woman and her child thrown out of the house on a false accusation of infidelity, forged medical documents, stripped of all rights. Now there was proof of their lies. This will be a high-profile case, said Seon-woo, scanning through copies of the documents. If we can prove the medical certificate was forged, the Lim family will face not only a civil suit but criminal charges as well. That's exactly what we're aiming for, Gitchall nodded. Sianwu, you'll handle the paperwork. Find every inconsistency, check the doctor's signatures, stamps, and dates. Taigu, prepare the lawsuit for restoration of rights. Jaihin, start collecting material for the criminal case on defamation and forgery. They dispersed to their tasks, and soon Miho arrived. The detective looked tired but satisfied, the kind of expression people wear when they've struck gold. All right, he began, spreading out printouts and photographs across the table. The Lim family. Let's start with the mother. Lim Haejin, widow. Her husband died 15 years ago, leaving her a modest fortune from a real estate business. She's been living off rent and investment income. The elder son, Min Jae, works as a bank manager, middle income. The younger, Sang Yoon, the one in question, worked for a construction company until last year, then quit. He's currently listed as unemployed. Why did he quit? Asked Gitchall. Officially, by choice. But I dug deeper. Turns out, he had issues at work. Several complaints from coworkers about erratic behavior. The police were even called once after he caused a scene at the office. No charges were filed, but the company asked him to leave quietly. Gitchall frowned. What kind of erratic behavior? Aggression. Outbursts of anger. One of his former colleagues told me off the record that Sang Yoon has been battling depression and seeing a psychiatrist for the past 3 years. What triggered the depression? That's the interesting part. Miho pulled out another folder. 2 years ago, Sang Yoon had a breakdown. He ended up in the hospital after a suicide attempt. The reason, he'd learned he was infertile. Gitchall froze. Meaning? Meaning he really was diagnosed with infertility. But not when his mother showed him that certificate 5 years ago, later. 3 years ago. And this time, it was real, the result of an infection he contracted after he was already married, but after Sohee was born. Gitchall leaned back in his chair, processing the information. So his mother lied to him about being infertile 5 years ago, to make him believe the child wasn't his. And then, later, he actually became infertile. And when he found out, he realized Sohee had been his only chance to have a child, a chance his mother stole from him. Exactly, confirmed Miho. And there's more. Sang Yoon's remarried now. His wife's name is Ura, they've been married 4 years. No children. Ura's from a wealthy family, her father owns a chain of restaurants. I think the mother arranged that marriage. I dug deeper, Miho continued. Turns out, 8 years ago, Ura's father was already negotiating with Haejin about a potential match between their children. The deal was practically sealed. But at that time, Sang Yoon was dating some girl and refused to break up. That's when Haejin launched her cleansing operation. She got rid of that girl, then introduced Yoon-hee as a temporary substitute, thinking a simple clerk would be obedient and easy to remove later. But Yoon-hee got pregnant sooner than expected. So Haejin had to act ruthlessly. The deal with Ura's family was too lucrative to risk over a grandchild. She destroyed her son's, her grandchild's, and her daughter-in-law's lives, all for money. Gitchall felt anger boil in his chest. Looks that way. And now for the most interesting part, Miho laid a photograph on the table. This is the doctor who supposedly issued the infertility certificate 5 years ago, Dr. No Hisak. I found him. He works at a private clinic in Gangnam. I spoke to him last night. And? He denies ever issuing such a certificate. Says he's never had a patient named Lim Sang Yoon. I showed him a copy of the document your assistant sent me. He confirmed the signature looks like his, but the stamp is fake. His clinic uses a different seal. Gitchall took the photo of the certificate and examined it closely. So Haejin ordered a forgery. Found a signature resembling that of a real doctor, made a counterfeit stamp. Sang-yoon believed it neither because he wanted to, or because his mother convinced him not to check. Most likely, Miho nodded. But there's a problem. Dr. No doesn't want to testify officially. He's afraid it'll hurt his reputation, since his signature was used in a forgery. Even if he's the victim, people might doubt him. I'll talk to him. Gichol wrote down the clinic's address. I'll convince him that silence is worse than the truth. If he doesn't help, it means his forged signature might be used again. Miho nodded. One more thing. I checked the 10-year-old connections like you asked. Yoonhee worked as a clerk in the archives of Taesan Group, a construction company. You know who else worked there at the time? Who? Min-jae. He was in the main office, she was in a branch. They were in the same company but different buildings. She said she saw him only once, at a corporate event. He didn't even look her way. She had no idea he had access to personnel records for all departments. Gichol felt a chill run through him. So he knew Yoonhee even before she married his brother? Yes. Moreover, I found someone who used to work there too. He said Min-jae was the one who fired Yoonhee. There was some kind of scandal. Nobody knows the details, but she left suddenly, in the middle of the workday, and never came back. That was 2 weeks before she got a new job, where she met Sang-yoon. Gichol stood and began pacing the room. The picture was coming together, and it was even filthier than he'd imagined. So the Lim family manipulated Yoonhee twice, he said aloud, thinking. First, Min-jae forced her out of her job 8 years ago. Then the mother forged the certificate to drive her out of Sang-yoon's life. The question is, why? What did she do to them? Maybe Haejin just didn't like her, Miho suggested. She seems like the kind of woman who thinks no one is good enough for her sons. Maybe. But I want to know for sure. Keep digging. I want every detail. Miho gathered the documents and left. Gichol was alone again. He looked at the photo of Sohee that Yoonhee had left yesterday. The little girl with serious eyes stared straight into the camera, not smiling. A 5-year-old who had already seen too much pain. He took out his phone and dialed Yoonhee's number. Hello? Her voice sounded tense. She clearly hadn't expected his call so soon. It's Gichol. We need to meet today. I found something about your case. Can you come to the office by 3? Yes, of course. Did something happen? I'll explain in person. And, Yoonhee. Bring Sohee. I want to meet her. Yoonhee was silent for a moment, then answered quietly, all right. We'll be there. At 3 o'clock, Miss Suk escorted Yoonhee and the little girl into the office. Gichol rose from his chair, and his gaze fell on the child. Sohee held her mother's hand, hiding behind her leg. She was small for her age, thin, with dark hair tied in a ponytail. Her clothes were simple, an old jacket, jeans patched at the knee, worn-out sneakers. But her eyes were bright, observant. She looked at Gichol cautiously, but not with fear. Sohee, this is Gichol, Yoonhee introduced. He's a lawyer. He'll be helping us. The girl nodded but didn't speak. Yoonhee gave Gichol an apologetic look. She's shy. Not used to strangers. That's all right. Gichol crouched down so he was at the child's level. Hi, Sohee. You know, I've got some picture books in the room next door. Would you like to look at them while your mom and I talk? Sohee glanced at her mother. Yoonhee nodded. The girl hesitantly stepped forward. Gichol led her into a small meeting room where, indeed, a few children's books stood neatly on a shelf, ones he kept for clients who came in with kids. He settled Sohee into a chair and handed her a brightly illustrated book. The girl opened it and buried herself in the pages. When he returned to his office, he closed the door and sat across from Yoonhee. She's very quiet, he observed. Yes, Yoonhee smiled sadly. She's seen too much. Been through too much. Children shouldn't be that serious at 5 years old. But she never really had a childhood like other kids. Gitchall nodded, then moved to business. I got information from the private detective. What I learned changes everything. Yoon-hee, I have to ask, did you know that Son-yoon's older brother, Min-jae, worked at the same company where you started? Yoon-hee flinched. What? No. I didn't. I mean, I knew he worked for the same company, but we never crossed paths. He was in another building, another department. I saw him once at a company party. He didn't even look my way. But he was the one who fired you, said Gitchall gently. 8 years ago. There was some kind of scandal, and you left that same day. Yoon-hee turned pale. Her hands trembled. How do you know that? The detective found witnesses. Yoon-hee, what happened back then? She was silent for a long time. Gitchall could see the struggle on her face, deciding whether to speak or not. At last, she took a deep breath. All right. I'll tell you. Everything. About that day, and about why I left you. Gitchall prepared himself to listen. What he heard was worse than anything he had imagined. 8 years ago, we'd been together for 6 months, Yoon-hee began quietly. I was happy. You were the first person who made me believe I was worth something. I wanted to be with you forever. But then, that incident at work happened. She clenched her hands into fists. They called me into HR. Min-jae was there, and another man I didn't know. They said someone had filed a complaint against me, accused me of stealing company data and selling it to competitors. They showed me documents with my signature, contracts for data sales. I had no idea what they were talking about. I told them I had never done such a thing, that the signatures were forged. But Min-jae was relentless. He said they had proof. That if I didn't resign quietly, they'd hand it over to the police. Gitchall felt anger building in his chest. They blackmailed you. Yes. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified they'd arrest me. That you'd find out and be disappointed in me. Min-jae gave me 1 hour to pack my things and leave. He said if I told anyone, they'd destroy my reputation completely. So I left. Got on the subway and rode with no idea where I was going, just trying to figure out how to go on living. Yoon-hee wiped away the tears that had welled up. Then a woman called me. She didn't give her name, but I could tell she was someone powerful. She said she knew about my situation. That she could help clear my name, make the accusations disappear, even find me a new job. But there was a condition. To leave me, Gitchall finished for her. Yoon-hee nodded. She said you were from a good family, that you had a bright future, and I was nobody, a burden. She said that if I truly loved you, I'd let you go. She gave me 2 days to decide. Told me that if I refused, those evidence documents would go to the police, and I'd end up in prison. Gitchall closed his eyes. He could picture what Yoon-hee must have gone through then, young, frightened, alone. Easy to break. I thought about it for those 2 days, Yoon-hee continued. Thought about what was right. I knew that if I told you, you'd fight for me. But I was afraid it would hurt you. Those people, the ones who had enough power to forge documents and blackmail, they could have gone after you too. So I took their offer. Disappeared from your life. Changed my phone number, moved to another neighborhood. They kept their word, found me another job. No one ever mentioned those accusations again. She lifted her gaze, her eyes full of pain. I'm sorry, Gitchall. I was a coward. I should have trusted you, told you the truth. But I was scared. Scared of losing you, not just because of their threats, but because you might believe I was really guilty. Gitchall stood and walked to the window. His chest ached with rage and grief. For 8 years, he'd hated Yoon-hee, believing she had simply left him. But she'd been manipulated, forced to go. Do you know who that woman on the phone was? He asked without turning around. No. But now that you've mentioned Min Jae, I think it was Haejin. Son Yoon's mother. Everything fits too perfectly. She arranged it all to make me leave you. Then she introduced me to Son Yoon through that new job. It was all planned. Gichol turned. Why? Why did she want you with Son Yoon so badly? I don't know. Maybe she thought I was convenient, quiet, no family, no connections. Someone easy to control. But when I stopped being obedient, when I had So-hee and started loving her more than I listened to my mother-in-law, she decided to get rid of me. Gichol returned to his desk and sat down. His mind was already working, forming a strategy. This changes everything, he said. Now we can prove the Lim family has been targeting you for years. That this wasn't a single act of cruelty, but systematic harassment. But we'll need proof. That phone call 8 years ago, is there any way to trace it? Yoon-hee shook her head. I don't remember the number. And that phone's long gone. It's fine. We'll find other evidence. The forged documents they used against you at work, they have to exist somewhere. If the company didn't destroy them, we can get access through the court. He pulled out a notebook and began jotting notes. One more thing. The detective confirmed that Son Yoon really did become infertile 3 years ago. But that was after So-hee was born. Which means the mother lied to him back then, 5 years ago, to convince him the child wasn't his. And when he later learned the truth about his condition, he realized So-hee had been his only chance. And that chance was taken from him. Yoon-hee gasped. So he knows? Maybe. Even if he doesn't know for sure, he suspects. The detective says he's suffering from depression and undergoing treatment, probably because of all this. We can use that in court to show that even Son Yoon himself is a victim of his mother's manipulation. Yoon-hee sat in silence, processing everything. Then she asked quietly, do you think we'll win? Gichol looked at her. I don't just think it, he said firmly. I know it. We have the genetic test proving paternity. We have the forged medical certificate. We have witnesses who saw how you were forced out. And we have a history of manipulation that's lasted 8 years. The Lim family won't just lose, they'll answer for everything they've done. Yoon-hee nodded. For the first time in years, there was hope in her eyes, real, living hope. Thank you, she whispered. For believing me. For helping us. Don't thank me yet. Gichol tried to keep his tone professional, but couldn't hide the warmth in his voice. There's a hard battle ahead. But we'll get through it. Together. They spent another hour going over the details. Gichol explained which documents needed to be signed, how the trial would proceed, what to expect. Yoon-hee listened carefully, asked questions, and took notes in her small notebook. She was a smart woman, and Gichol could see that despite everything she had endured, she hadn't lost her ability to think clearly. When they finished, Gichol led them to the conference room where So-hee was still sitting with her picture book. The little girl looked up, and Gichol noticed she had read nearly half the book. Did you like it? He asked. So-hee nodded and spoke softly for the first time. It's about a rabbit who was looking for friends. He found them in the end. That's a good story, Gichol said. Everyone deserves friends. And everyone deserves happiness. So-hee steadied him with her serious eyes, as if deciding whether he meant what he said. Then she nodded. Mom says you'll help us. Yes. I will. Thank you, the girl said, and a shy smile appeared on her face for the first time. Gichol escorted them downstairs. As they left, he stood for a long moment watching them go. That little girl, who had already lived through more than any child should, deserved a better life. And he would give it to her. To both of them. Back in his office, he called Son. We need to file the lawsuit next week, he said. We don't have much time, but we'll make it. Gather the team. We're going into full mode. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of work. Gitch Hall and his team collected evidence, prepared documents, and interviewed witnesses. Milo kept digging into the Lim family's background, uncovering more details that strengthened their case. Gitch Hall personally met with Dr. No Hisik, whose signature had been forged on the fake medical certificate. It took hours of persuasion, but in the end the doctor agreed to testify. He provided samples of his real stamp and signature, as well as records proving he had never treated Lim Song-yoon. Sonu found another key point: the dates. The certificate was supposedly issued a year before So-hee was born, shortly after Yoon-hee and Son-yoon's wedding. But according to medical records, Son-yoon hadn't visited any clinics at that time. He was on a business trip in Busan, easily proven by company documents. Jae-hyun was preparing the criminal case: forgery, defamation, possibly even fraud, if they could prove that Haejin had gained something from destroying her son's marriage. Taegu was working on restoring parental rights. Formally, Yoon-hee had never lost them in court. Her documents had simply been taken, and she was thrown out. It was illegal, and Taegu was building the case to not only restore her rights but also demand a large compensation for moral damages. Gitch Hall hardly slept. He worked late into the night and arrived at the office at dawn. Yoon-hee called every day to ask about the case. Sometimes they met at a cafe near the office to go over details. Gitch Hall noticed how she was changing, a little more confident, a little stronger each day. As if the burden she had carried for 5 years was slowly lifting. He also noticed how his own feelings were slipping out of control. Every time Yoon-hee smiled, his heart tightened. Every time she spoke about So-hee with such tenderness, he admired her strength. He tried to tell himself it was just professional concern, a lawyer's care for his client. But he knew he was lying to himself. A week later, the lawsuit was ready. Gitch Hall personally delivered the documents to court. All that remained was to wait until the Lim family received the summons. The response came sooner than expected. 3 days after filing, Gitch Hall's secretary told him a woman named Lim Haejin had called, demanding an immediate meeting. She said it was about an absurd lawsuit against her family, Misuk reported with a hint of irritation. She was very arrogant. I told her you were busy, but she insisted. Left her number. Gitch Hall took the note and smiled faintly. So Haejin wanted to act fast. She probably thought she could intimidate or bribe the lawyer, as she had done before. Call her back, he said to Misuk. Tell her I can meet tomorrow at 11 a.m. here in the office. And inform security no one gets in except her. No lawyers, no relatives. Misuk nodded and left. Gitch Hall called Yoon-hee. Haejin wants a meeting, he said. Tomorrow. What will you tell her? Yoon-hee's voice trembled. Nothing that weakens our case. I'll just listen. Maybe she'll try to offer a deal. Or threaten me. Either way, it'll be useful. I'll see how she behaves when cornered. Be careful, Yoon-hee pleaded. She's dangerous. She knows how to manipulate people. Don't worry. I'm ready for that. The next morning, Gitch Hall arrived at the office early. He reviewed all the case materials, making sure every detail was fresh in his memory. When Misuk informed him that the visitor had arrived, he told her to bring her in. Lim Haejin was about 60, but looked younger. Well-groomed, with a neat hairstyle and an expensive suit. Gold rings sparkled on her fingers, a heavy watch on her wrist. She entered the office with the air of a queen granting an audience. Mr. Huang, she said without greeting. Thank you for taking the time to meet me. Gitch Hall gestured to the chair opposite him and sat down, keeping his expression neutral. Mrs. Lim. I'm listening. Haejin sat, placing her designer bag on her lap. She looked around the office, assessing the furniture and paintings, then fixed her gaze on him. I received a court summons from a certain Co Yoon-hee, she began coldly. The lawsuit is absurd and based on lies. That woman is trying to extort money from my family, using a child who has nothing to do with us. Do you have proof of that claim? Gichal asked calmly. Proof? Hae-jin sneered. I have a medical certificate confirming that my son is infertile. That woman cheated on him, bore another man's child, and now dares to accuse our family of throwing her out. We acted within the law. The medical certificate you're referring to is a forgery. Gichal opened the folder on his desk. We have an expert conclusion confirming that. Moreover, the doctor whose signature was used is ready to testify that he never treated your son. We also have a DNA test proving with 99.98% certainty that Lim Sang-yoon is the biological father of the girl. Hae-jin paled, though she quickly regained her composure. Those tests can be faked, she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice. The analysis was conducted in a certified laboratory with an impeccable reputation. In addition, we have witnesses, neighbors who saw you throw a young woman and her infant into the street on a cold night. There are also hospital records from the next day, when Yoon-hee came in with her sick child. All of this will be presented in court. Hae-jin was silent. Gichal could see her thinking rapidly, trying to find a way out. Suppose, she finally said, there was a mistake. That we were wrong about the child's paternity. But that doesn't change the fact that woman wasn't right for our family. She came from an ordinary background, without education or connections. My son deserved better. Your son deserved to know the truth about his own child, Gichal said coldly. And your granddaughter deserved to grow up in a home, not on the street. You stole 5 years of their lives with your lies. Hae-jin pressed her lips together. Then, unexpectedly, she changed tactics. She leaned forward, and her voice softened, almost trusting. Mr. Hwan, I understand that you're a good lawyer. That you are defending your client's interests. But let's be realistic. The trial could drag on for months, maybe years. It will cost both sides a lot. Why waste time and money when everything could be resolved peacefully? Go on, Gichal crossed his arms over his chest. I'm willing to pay compensation, Hae-jin named the amount. A fair sum for a woman who works as a cleaner. It's enough for her to start a new life, give her daughter an education. In return, she withdraws the lawsuit and never appears in my family's life again. Gichal smirked. Do you really think money can buy your way out? After what you've done? Everyone thinks about money, Hae-jin shrugged. Especially poor people. I'm sure your client won't refuse such an amount. You're wrong, Gichal stood up. My client doesn't want money. She wants justice. She wants her daughter to know who her father is. She wants you to be punished for destroying her life. And I will make sure she gets that. Hae-jin also stood. Her face twisted with anger. You don't know who you're dealing with, she hissed. I have connections. Money. Lawyers better than you. I will destroy this woman in court. I'll prove she's mentally unstable, a bad mother, incapable of raising her child. I'll take away even the scraps she has left. Try it. Gichal walked to the door and opened it. See you in court, Ms. Lim. Hae-jin grabbed her bag and headed for the exit. At the door, she turned back. You'll regret this, she threw over her shoulder. I will ruin you. Destroy your reputation. No one will want to deal with a lawyer who loses cases. I don't lose cases, Gichal replied calmly. Never. Especially when I know the truth is on my side. Hae-jin left, slamming the door loudly. Gichal returned to his desk and sat down. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from rage. This woman was a monster. Even now, with all the evidence against her, she felt no guilt. Only anger that her plans had collapsed. He picked up the phone and called Yoon-hee. The meeting is over, he said. She offered to buy her way out. I refused. Now there will be a real war. Are you sure we can handle this? Yunhee's voice trembled. Absolutely, Gichal spoke firmly. She's shown her cards. Now I know how she will act. And I'm ready. He didn't tell Yunhee that Haejin had threatened to destroy his reputation. He didn't want to scare her. But he understood it wouldn't be easy. Haejin wouldn't give up. She would attack from all sides. And he was right. The very next day, the information war began. An article appeared in one of the tabloid newspapers, specializing in scandals. The headline screamed, "Star lawyer handles mistress's case against a respectable family." The text was full of insinuations that Gichal allegedly had a personal relationship with his client, abused his position, and that the case was fabricated for extortion. Miss Suk brought the newspaper in the morning and placed it on the table with a grim expression. "This is just the beginning," she said. 3 clients have already called, asking if it's true. I explained that the article is slander, but they're nervous. Gichal read the article, clenching his jaw. Haejin had acted quickly. Apparently, she really did have connections in the media. "File a lawsuit against the newspaper for defamation," he ordered. "On my behalf. Demand a retraction and compensation. Let them see that we're not to be trifled with." But the articles kept coming. Rumors began spreading online. Someone created a fake account in Yunhee's name, posting slander about the Lim family to turn public opinion against her. Gichal blocked the account through an administrative complaint, but the damage was already done. Yunhee called him, crying. "Gichal, I can't. People are looking at me strangely. The cashier at the store near my house asked if I was the woman from the newspapers. So he asks why I'm crying. I don't know what to tell her." "Stay strong," Gichal spoke firmly, though he felt rage boiling inside. "It's temporary. Once the trial begins, the whole truth will come out. For now, ignore the articles. Don't read them, don't respond. They want to break you, don't let them." But Haejin didn't stop at an information attack. A week later, Gichal received a subpoena. A complaint had been filed against him with the Bar Association. The accusation, conflict of interest and unprofessional conduct. The complaint claimed that Gichal had past relations with the client, acting on personal motives rather than justice. Gichal understood that it was an attempt to remove him from the case. If the Bar Association decided the accusation was valid, he could lose his license or be temporarily suspended. Yunhee would be left without protection precisely when she needed it most. He gathered his team and announced, "They're pressuring me to step down from the case. But I won't. If the Bar Association decides to suspend me, he looked at Sonu, Taegu, and Jaehyun, will continue handling the case under my guidance unofficially. Formally, you'll be the lead lawyers, but we make all decisions together. Understood?" They nodded. Sonu said, "We're with you, Mr. Hwan. Until the end." The Bar Association hearing was scheduled in 2 weeks, just before the start of Yunhee's trial. Gichal prepared for both battles simultaneously. Meanwhile, Miho continued digging. One evening he called with new information. "Gichal, I found something important." The detective's voice was excited. "Remember we were looking for proof that Haejin manipulated Yunhee 8 years ago?" "Yes. I found the man who was with Min-jae when Yunhee was fired. His name is Ko Seongjin, now retired. He worked as head of the archives at that company. I spoke with him. At first, he didn't want to say anything, but when I explained that it was about restoring justice, he agreed to testify." "And what did he say?" "That Min-jae paid him to stay silent. He showed forged documents with Yunhee's signature and ordered her dismissal under threat of exposure. Seongjin needed money then, his wife was ill, needed treatment. He agreed. But he's been tormented by guilt all these years. He's ready to tell the truth in court." Gichal felt a surge of hope. Excellent. That's exactly what we need. Get a written statement from him. Let him describe everything in detail: when, where, how much money he received, what Ming-Jae said exactly. Already on it. And there's something else. I checked Haejin's financial transactions over the past 8 years. She transferred a large sum to a journalist back when Yoon-hee disappeared from your life. That same journalist now works at the newspaper publishing defamatory articles about you. Gitchal smirked grimly. So, she not only manipulated Yoon-hee but also bribed the media to control the situation. Good. Gather evidence of those transfers. We'll prove systematic corruption and manipulation. When Miho hung up, Gitchal called Yoon-hee and told her about the new findings. We're close to victory, he said. Just a little more to go. Gitchal, Yoon-hee's voice trembled, not from tears but from excitement. I want to see Sanhyun. Gitchal froze. Why? I need to talk to him. To find out if he knew what his mother was doing. If he understood that so he was his daughter. I need to hear it from him. Gitchal was silent. He understood her desire but worried. It could be dangerous. He might try to manipulate you, or Haejin could use this meeting against us in court. I'm willing to take the risk, Yoon-hee said firmly. Please help me arrange the meeting. Let it happen in a safe place, with you nearby. But I must do this. Gitchal sighed. He knew he couldn't dissuade her. Fine. I'll contact Sanhyun's lawyer, if he has one. Or directly with him if not. We'll arrange a meeting at a neutral location. But promise me, you won't make any decisions without me. Whatever he says. I promise. The next day, Gitchal contacted Sanhyun. He got his number through Miho and called him directly. Sanhyun answered on the third ring. His voice sounded tired, lost. Hello? Lim Sanhyun? This is lawyer Hwan Gitchal. I represent So Yoon-hee in the case against your family. A long pause followed. Then Sanhyun quietly said, I know who you are. What do you need? My client wants to meet with you. To talk in person. No lawyers, no family. Just the two of you. I'll be present as a witness but won't interfere unless you want me to. Do you agree? Sanhyun was silent again. When? He finally asked. Tomorrow. 3 p.m. Autumn Leaf Cafe on Jianro Street. Do you know the place? Yes. I'll be there. Gitchal hung up and called Yoon-hee to inform her that the meeting was arranged. She thanked him with a trembling voice. The next day, they arrived at the cafe early. Gitchal chose a table in the far corner, with a full view of the room. Yoon-hee sat across from him, nervously fiddling with a napkin. She wore a simple black dress, had her hair tied back, looking tired but determined. Exactly at 3, the cafe door opened, and Sanhyun walked in. Gitchal recognized him from the photos Miho had collected. A man of about 37, average height, with a gaunt face and sunken eyes. Dressed sloppily, wrinkled shirt, jeans. Hair unkempt. He looked like a man enduring a deep crisis. Sanhyun saw Yoon-hee and froze. His face twisted either in pain or shame. He slowly approached the table and sat down. Yoon-hee, he whispered. I. She raised her hand to stop him. No apologies. Not yet. I want you to answer my questions. Honestly. Sanhyun nodded. Yoon-hee took a deep breath. Did you know? She asked. Did you know that So-hee was your daughter? That your mother falsified the medical certificate? Sanhyun covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. I didn't know at the time, he whispered through his fingers. 5 years ago, I truly believed my mother. She showed me the certificate, brought in a doctor to confirm the diagnosis. I believed it. Thought you had cheated on me. I was angry, confused, didn't know how to react. Mother controlled everything. She said it would be better this way, to let you go, to forget. I was weak. I let her drive you out with the child. He lowered his hands. His eyes were red. But 3 years ago, I became infertile. Really? After that infection. Doctors said it was irreversible. And then I started thinking. If I couldn't have children now, why was my mother so sure I couldn't before? I demanded the documents from her, the certificate. At first she refused, then she showed them. I took them to an independent expert. He said the seal was forged. That the signature didn't match medical standards of the time. Uni listened without interrupting. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. I realized my mother lied, Sanhyun continued. That so he was my daughter. My only child. And I lost her. I tried to find you. But you disappeared. Changed your address, phone, job. I searched for over a year but couldn't find you. And then I just broke down. Fell into depression. Tried to end my life. Couldn't live with the realization of what I'd done. He looked at Yun-hee. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know, I never wanted to hurt you. I was a fool, used by my mother as a puppet. And I've paid for it. Lost the only thing that mattered. Yun-hee was silent for a long time. Then she quietly asked, do you want to see her? So he? Sanhyun flinched. His lips trembled. I have no right. Don't deserve to. She's your daughter, Yun-hee said firmly. And she deserves to know who her father is. Not for you. For her. Every child has the right to know both parents. Sanhyun cried. Quietly, restrained, but tears streamed down his face, falling onto the table. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for this. Gichol watched silently. He saw Sanhyun's genuine remorse. This man was not evil. Weak, manipulated, but not malicious. The real villain was Haejin. She destroyed everyone's lives around her for her ambitions. Sanhyun, Gichol spoke for the first time. Will you testify in court? Tell the truth about your mother falsifying documents? Sanhyun looked up at him and nodded. Yes. I'll tell everything. My mother must answer for what she did. She destroyed not only your life, Yun-hee. She destroyed mine too. And my current wife. He gave a bitter smile. URA didn't marry me for love. Her father forced it, in agreement with my mother. We are unhappy together. She wants children, and I can't give them to her. Our marriage is an empty shell. Everything related to my mother became lies and misery. Then help us win this case, Gichol urged. Give testimony. Describe in detail how your mother manipulated you. It will be key evidence. I will, Sanhyun looked at Yun-hee. I have to. At least this. They talked a little longer. Sanhyun asked about So-hee, what she liked, how she studies, what her interests were. Yun-hee shared, and Gichol saw her voice soften. She was forgiving Sanhyun. Not because he deserved it, but because she no longer wanted to carry hatred. When they left the cafe, Gichol escorted Yun-hee to her car. She turned to him. Thank you for arranging this meeting, she said. I needed to hear it from him. Needed to understand that he was also a victim. But it doesn't absolve him, Gichol reminded her. He let his mother control him. Didn't protect you and So-hee. He's responsible for that. I know. But he admitted it. Willing to make amends. That's something. Gichol nodded. He understood her. Yun-hee was stronger than many people he knew. She had survived betrayal, poverty, loneliness, and had not become bitter. Had not lost the ability to forgive. And in that moment he realized he was in love with her again. Or perhaps he had never stopped loving her. The hearing at the Bar Association was tense. The Lim family's representative, a middle-aged lawyer with a haughty expression, accused Gitchall of a conflict of interest. He claimed that Gitchall was using his position to settle personal scores, that his relationship with the client went beyond professional bounds. Gitchall defended himself methodically. He presented evidence that he had not seen Yun-hee for 8 years. That she had come to him as an ordinary client, not even knowing he headed a corporation. That all his actions had been strictly within the law and professional ethics. The Bar Association panel heard both sides. They deliberated for 2 hours. Gitchall waited in the corridor, knowing that his future, and Yun-hee's case, hung in the balance. Finally the door opened and the chair of the panel announced the decision. After reviewing all circumstances, the panel finds the complaint unfounded. Attorney Huan acted in accordance with professional standards. No disciplinary measures will be applied. Case closed. Gitchall exhaled with relief. He had won the first battle. The main one, the trial, still lay ahead. The court session was scheduled for early autumn. Gitchall and his team prepared thoroughly. They rehearsed every question, every answer. They prepared witnesses, the Dr. No, who would confirm the forged certificate Ko-seongjin, who would testify about the manipulation that led to Yun-hee's dismissal, neighbors who had seen Yun-hee being forced out into the street, and San-hyun himself, who would testify against his own mother. Yun-hee prepared as well. Gitchall ran rehearsals with her, teaching her how to answer the judge's questions, how to stand up to cross-examination, how to remain calm when the opposing counsel tried to rattle her. Remember, he told her, the truth is on your side. Speak plainly, honestly. Don't embellish, don't exaggerate. Just tell it like it was. The judge will recognize sincerity. Yun-hee nodded, took notes, and practiced her answers. She was afraid, but determined. On the eve of the trial, Gitchall invited her to his office. They sat at the desk going over the last documents when Yun-hee suddenly set the papers aside and looked at him. Gitchall, I want to tell you something, she began quietly. Regardless of how the trial ends, I want you to know. I never stopped loving you. Even when I left 8 years ago, even when I married someone else. You were always in my heart. The only real one. Gitchall froze. His heart hammered. Yun-hee. Don't say anything, she raised a hand. I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve a second chance. I just wanted you to know the truth. The whole truth. Gitchall stood, went around the desk and crouched in front of her. He took her hands in his. You didn't hurt me, he said softly. Those who manipulated you did. You were a victim, Yun-hee. A victim of someone else's cruelty and lies. And I'm not angry with you. Never truly angry. I just missed you. For 8 years I missed you every day. Yun-hee began to cry. He pulled her into his arms, and she pressed against his shoulder like she had once, many years ago. I missed you too, she whispered. Every night, every morning. I pictured what our life would have been if not for those people, that lie. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other. For the first time in 8 years, Gitchall felt whole. As if the part of his soul that had been torn away had been put back. After the trial, he whispered, when everything is over, we'll start anew. If you want. You, me, and So-hee. We'll be a family. Yun-hee pulled back and looked him in the eyes. Do you really want that? Truly? More than anything. She smiled through her tears. For the first time in years her smile was genuine, happy. Then I wanted to. They kissed, gently, cautiously, as if afraid to break the moment. When their lips met, Gitchall felt everything fall into place. It felt right. It was what he had waited for all those years. When they parted, he smiled at her. Now go home. Big day tomorrow. We need our rest. He saw her to the car and watched until she disappeared round the corner. Then he returned to the office but could not work. He sat in his chair, staring out the window, thinking about the future. The life that would begin after the trial. About Yun-hee. About little So-hee, who would become part of his life. About the family they would build. But first they had to win the trial. And he was ready to fight for it to the end. The day of the trial dawned clear and cool. Gitchall arrived at the courthouse an hour before proceedings began. Yun-hee was already waiting on the steps, wearing the sober gray suit they had bought for the occasion. So he stood beside her, holding her mother's hand. The girl wore a dark dress, her hair was braided. Ready? Gitchall asked. Yun-hee nodded. Her face was pale but resolute. Ready. They entered the building. The courtroom was small but packed. On one side sat the Lim family, Hae-jin in an expensive suit with a haughty look beside her Min-jae, nervously tapping his fingers on the table. San-hyun was not present. He was to appear as a witness for the prosecution, not the defense. The judge, a middle-aged woman with stern features, entered at the appointed time. Everyone stood. The session began. Gitchall spoke first. He laid out the case clearly and concisely. Yun-hee had been accused of infidelity on the basis of a forged medical certificate, driven from the house with a 3-month-old baby, stripped of rights and means of support. Now they had proof the certificate was forged, that the child was Lim San-hyun's biological daughter, and that the Lim family bore full responsibility for the harm caused. The Lim family's lawyer, a man named Yu, objected, arguing that the family had acted in good faith based on medical documents they believed genuine. That they could not have known of any forgery if one indeed existed. Gitchall then called the first witness, Dr. No Hisik. The doctor calmly confirmed that he had never treated Lim San-hyun, that while the signature on the certificate might resemble his, the stamp was forged, and that he was prepared to provide all his records for verification. Attorney Yu tried to discredit the witness, suggesting that the doctor might simply have forgotten a patient from 10 years ago. But Dr. No stood his ground. His clinic kept meticulous records, and Lim San-hyun was not in them. Next came Ko Seong-jin. The former head of archives recounted how Lim Min-jae had bribed him to dismiss Yun-hee on fabricated charges. He described in detail how much money he received, what Min-jae said, which documents were shown. His testimony was convincing and full of specifics. Attorney Yu attacked him as well, accusing him of being a criminal, a bribe-taker whose testimony could not be trusted. But Ko Seong-jin did not falter. Yes, I committed a crime, he admitted. But it's time to make things right. I've lived with this burden for 8 years. It's time to tell the truth. The judge listened attentively, taking notes. Her face remained impassive. The next witnesses were the neighbors who had seen Yun-hee being thrown out of the house. An elderly woman who lived upstairs recounted how she had heard the shouting, how she had seen the young woman with a baby in her arms sitting in the stairwell and crying. How she had offered help, but Yun-hee had refused, afraid to cause trouble. I'll never forget that sight, the neighbor said, wiping her tears. So young, with such a tiny baby, and so lost. I offered to call the police, but she begged me not to. She was afraid they'd take the child away. That testimony made an impression on the judge. Gitchall saw her expression soften. At last, the key witness took the stand, Lim San-hyun. When he entered the courtroom, Hae-jin flinched at the sight of her son. San-hyun did not look at her. He approached the witness stand and swore to tell the truth. Gitchall questioned him carefully, giving him space to tell the story in his own words. And San-hyun told everything, how his mother had convinced him he was infertile, how he had believed her without checking, how they had driven Yun-hee away, how 3 years ago he had learned the truth and tried to find his daughter. I'm guilty, he said, looking straight at the judge. I didn't protect my wife and child. I let my mother control me. But my mother is more guilty than I am. She lied. She forged documents. She destroyed people's lives for her own ambitions. I asked the court to punish her. And to give me a chance to make things right, to be a father to Sohee. The courtroom was silent. Hajan sat with a stony face, but her hands were trembling. Attorney Yu tried to attack Sanhyun as well, calling him an ungrateful son who had betrayed his mother. But the judge stopped him. Enough, she said sternly. The witness is answering honestly. Continue. The final witness was Yoonhee herself. She told her story from beginning to end. She didn't cry, didn't complain, she simply laid out the facts. How she had been forced to leave Gichol, how she had met Sanhyun, how Sohee was born, how they were thrown out, how she survived 5 years working multiple jobs, how she had saved for the DNA test. I don't want revenge, she said in conclusion. I just want justice. I want my daughter to know the truth, to be proud of herself, to know who she is and where she comes from. And I want the people who destroyed my life to be held accountable. Attorney Yu tried to catch her in contradictions, asked tricky questions. But Yoonhee answered calmly and consistently. Gichol watched her with pride. She was strong. When her questioning was over, the judge announced a recess for deliberation. Everyone left the courtroom. Gichol, Yoonhee, and Sohee sat in the hallway, waiting. Yoonhee held her daughter's hand, stroking her hair. Mom, did we win? Sohee asked quietly. I don't know, sweetheart, Yoonhee hugged her. But we did everything we could. Now the judge will decide. An hour of waiting felt like an eternity. Finally, they were called back into the courtroom. The judge returned and took her seat. Her face was serious. After reviewing all presented evidence and hearing witness testimony, she began, the court has reached the following conclusion. Gichol held his breath. The medical certificate declaring Lim Sanhyun infertile is a forgery. This is confirmed by expert analysis and the testimony of Dr. No. Genetic testing conclusively proves that Lim Sohee is the biological daughter of Lim Sanhyun. The actions of the Lim family in expelling So Yoonhee and her child were unlawful and cruel. The court rules as follows. 1. Restore all parental rights of So Yoonhee concerning her daughter, Lim Sohee. 2. Require Lim Sanhyun to acknowledge paternity and to pay child support for the entire period from the child's birth to the present, and continuing henceforth. 3. Order Lim Hajan and Lim Min-jae jointly to pay compensation for moral damages to So Yoonhee in the amount of. She named a substantial figure. 4. Transfer the case materials to the prosecutor's office to initiate criminal proceedings for document forgery and defamation. The session is adjourned. The judge struck her gavel. Exclamations filled the courtroom. Yoonhee covered her face with her hands and burst into tears, this time of relief, of joy. Gichol embraced her, holding her tightly. Sohee looked at her mother in confusion, then began to cry too, smiling through her tears as she saw her mother's happiness. Hajan rose to leave, but the officers stationed in the courtroom stopped her. The judge ordered her detained pending transfer of the materials to the prosecutor's office. Hajan screamed, accusing everyone of conspiracy, but she was led away. Min-jae sat pale and silent, realizing that punishment awaited him as well. Sanhyun approached Yoonhee. He looked at Sohee. The girl watched him warily. Hello, he said quietly. I'm your father. I know I wasn't there for you. I'm sorry. But if you'll let me, I want to make it right. I want to be part of your life. Sohee looked at her mother. Yoonhee nodded. The girl stepped toward Sanhyun and suddenly hugged him. Sanhyun froze, then gently wrapped his arms around his daughter, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, he whispered to Yoonhee. Thank you for this. Gichol watched the scene, feeling warmth fill his chest. Justice had prevailed. Truth had triumphed. 6 months passed. Haejin was convicted of forgery and defamation and sentenced to 3 years probation with mandatory community service. Min-jae also faced punishment, a fine and 2 years of probation. Their reputations were ruined, their business suffered. Sang-hyun divorced his second wife, Yura. They parted on good terms, both understood the marriage had been a mistake. Sang-hyun found a new job, began treatment for depression, and slowly came back to life. He met with So-hee regularly, took her to parks, exhibitions, and movies. The relationship between father and daughter was rebuilding, slowly but steadily. Yoon-hee moved into a new apartment, spacious, bright, in a good neighborhood. She set aside part of the compensation money for So-hee's future education and invested the rest in a small business, a cozy cafe serving homemade pastries. The cafe quickly became popular in the area. So-hee went to a good school. She was blossoming before their eyes, making friends, discovering new interests. She began to smile more often, to laugh. The childhood she had been deprived of for her first 5 years was slowly returning. And Jickle. Jickle walked So-hee to school in the mornings when Yoon-hee had an early shift at the cafe. He helped the girl with her homework. Read her bedtime stories. He wasn't her father by blood, but he had become one by choice. And So-hee accepted him, loved him as deeply as she loved Sang-hyun. That day was special. Late spring, a warm sunny morning. Jickle came to pick up Yoon-hee and So-hee at their house. They were going for a picnic in the park. Sang-hyun was going to join them too. They had all agreed that it was important for So-hee to see that the adults in her life could get along. While they were sitting on a blanket under blooming cherry trees, So-hee ran around with a kite, and Yoon-hee watched her with a smile. Then Jickle reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Yoon-hee, he called softly. She turned. When she saw the box, she gasped. Jickle. I've wanted to do this for a long time, he said, opening the box. Inside lay a simple yet elegant ring. 8 years ago, we lost each other. But fate gave us a second chance. I don't want to waste it. Marry me, Yoon-hee. Let's build the family we once dreamed of. Yoon-hee laughed and cried at the same time. She nodded, unable to speak. Jickle slipped the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around his neck. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. So he ran up, saw what was happening, and screamed with joy. Sang-hyun, sitting a little ways off, smiled and clapped his hands. He was genuinely happy for them. Congratulations, he said, coming closer. You both deserve this happiness. So he hugged both Yoon-hee and Jickle at once, squealing with delight. Are we going to be a real family now? She asked. With Mom, and Jickle, and Dad Sang-hyun. Yes, sweetheart, Yoon-hee stroked her daughter's hair. You'll have a big family. A mom, and 2 dads who love you. Isn't that wonderful? So he nodded, beaming. It's the best thing ever. They spent the rest of the day in the park, flying the kite, eating the food Yoon-hee had prepared, laughing. For the first time in years, all of them felt whole, felt happy. As the sun began to set, they packed up. Sang-hyun said goodbye to So-hee, promising to take her to the zoo that weekend. The girl agreed eagerly. Jickle drove Yoon-hee and So-hee home. Soft music played in the car. So-hee had fallen asleep in the back seat. Yoon-hee looked at the ring on her hand, still not quite believing it was real. Are you happy? Jickle asked quietly. More than ever, she answered. I never thought that after everything that happened, I could be happy again. But you showed me it's possible to start over, even when it feels like everything's lost. We both started over, Jickle said, taking her hand without looking away from the road. I lived like a robot for 8 years. Worked, earned money, won cases. But I wasn't really living. You brought me back to life. You and So-hee. Yoon-hee squeezed his hand. You know what's amazing? She whispered. If not for all that pain, all the lies and suffering, we wouldn't have come to this moment. We wouldn't value what we have now so deeply. Maybe it was all meant to happen this way. Maybe, Jekyll agreed. But I still wish you hadn't had to go through all that. I wish I could have protected you from that pain. You did protect me, Yun-hee smiled. When it mattered most. You gave me justice. You gave me a future. You gave us a future. They arrived at Yun-hee's building. Jekyll gently carried the sleeping So-hee upstairs and laid her in bed, tucking her in. He kissed her forehead. So-hee smiled in her sleep. Yun-hee stood in the doorway, watching them. When Jekyll came out, she hugged him. Will you stay? She asked softly. Forever, he answered, kissing her. They went to the living room and sat on the couch. Yun-hee rested her head on his shoulder. When's the wedding? She asked. Whenever you want. Tomorrow, if you like. Yun-hee laughed. Let's do it in autumn. When the leaves turn gold. It's my favorite season. Autumn it is, Jekyll agreed. We'll have a small ceremony. Just close friends. My colleagues, your friends, Sang-yeon and So-hee. Sounds perfect. They sat in silence, listening to the wind rustling the trees outside. Yun-hee thought of the long road she had traveled. The 5 years of poverty and struggle. The fear and despair she'd endured. And how everything had changed. Jekyll, she said quietly. Do you think Haejin will ever realize what she's done? Jekyll thought for a moment. I don't know. Some people just can't admit their mistakes. They're too proud, too convinced they're right. But that's not our problem anymore. She's faced her consequences. Let her live with them. And Sang-yeon. I'm glad he's trying to make things right. That he wants to be a father to So-hee. He's a good man who fell under the influence of a manipulator, Jekyll said. But he found the strength to break free. That takes courage. Yes, Yun-hee nodded. So-hee deserves to know both her parents. I don't want to take her father away from her, no matter what happened in the past. You're an incredible woman, Jekyll kissed the top of her head. You went through hell and didn't turn bitter. You taught So-hee kindness, even in a cruel world. That's a rare gift. I just didn't want her to grow up with hate in her heart, Yun-hee whispered. I wanted her to believe in people, in goodness, in justice. Even when it felt like the world was against us. They talked late into the night, about the future, their plans, their dreams. Jekyll told her he wanted to take So-hee to an amusement park next weekend, and buy her the book she'd been dreaming of. Yun-hee shared ideas for her cafe, new recipes, plans to expand. They were building a future together, brick by brick. When Jekyll finally got up to leave, Yun-hee walked him to the door. See you tomorrow? She asked. Of course. I'll pick you up for breakfast. I know a great place. She kissed him goodbye, and he left. Yun-hee closed the door, leaned against it, and closed her eyes. The smile wouldn't leave her face. She went to the kitchen, made herself some tea, and sat by the window, gazing at the night city. She thought about how much her life had changed in the past few months, from despair to hope, from poverty to comfort, from loneliness to love. For 5 years she'd saved money for that DNA test, not knowing whether it would change anything. But she had believed. Believed that truth would prevail. That justice existed. That one day her daughter would know who she really was. And that day had come. So-hee knew the truth now. She knew she was Lim So-hee, Sang-yeon's daughter. She knew her mother had fought for her for 5 long years. She knew she was loved, by her mother, by her father, and by Jekyll, who had become her second pillar of strength. Yun-hee looked at the ring on her finger. It gleamed softly in the moonlight streaming through the window. A symbol of a new beginning. a symbol of love that had survived 8 years of separation, pain, and lies. She remembered the day she had walked into the CEO's office of the law firm and seen Jekyll again. How pale he had gone when he recognized her. How his voice had trembled when he spoke her name. How he had looked at her, with pain, disbelief, but also with hope. Back then, she hadn't known how it would all end. She had feared that he would refuse to help her, that he would never forgive her for disappearing 8 years ago. But he had helped. Not just as a lawyer, as a man who still cared for her. And now they were here. Together. With their daughter sleeping in the next room, with peace in their hearts, and with a future that looked bright. Yoon-hee finished her tea and went to bed. Before lying down, she peeked into So-hee's room. The girl was asleep, hugging the plush bear Jekyll had given her. A small smile played on her face. "Good night, my sunshine," Yoon-hee whispered. "Tomorrow will be a new day. The first day of our new life." She closed the door and went to her bedroom. She lay down, pulled the blanket over herself. The moon shone outside, bathing the world in soft silver light. The city slept. But in that small apartment, 3 hearts beat, full of hope, love, and faith in the future. The story of Yoon-hee, a story that began with pain and betrayal, ended in the triumph of justice. The Lim family, who had destroyed her life, got what they deserved. So-hee learned the truth about who she was. Sang-yeon was given a chance to correct the mistakes of the past. And Jekyll and Yoon-hee found each other again, after 10 long years apart, realizing that love is stronger than lies, stronger than pain, stronger than time. Now they had their whole lives ahead of them. A whole life to be happy. A whole life to raise So-hee, to love each other, to build a family. And they weren't going to waste that second chance. The story had ended, but their life had only just begun.